The sun had not yet risen when Eniola was awakened by the sound of her aunt whispering her name. She opened her eyes to darkness and the scent of burning myrrh curling through the air. Her aunt did not speak again, just handed her a folded cloth, soft and light, dyed in deep blues and black, stitched with symbols Eniola didn't yet know how to read. She sat up slowly, her body already knowing what this meant. It was the day of the Festival of Remembrance. She had danced before many times, but something felt different this year. The house was too quiet. No cousins running through the yard, no neighbors gathering outside with cloth bundles and offerings. Even the birds were silent. She dressed in silence. The cloth was old, worn smooth with years of hands and rituals. It barely clung to her slight frame and her feet remained bare as always. They had told her long ago that the dead remembered only skin, not shoes. She had danced barefoot in the village square since she was 7, when her mother passed and her body was laid under the spirit tree. Each year, her steps were watched not just by the villagers, but by the eyes that lingered beyond the veil, eyes she sometimes felt pressing against her ribs between her shoulder blades. The grave field was a stretch of land at the far end of the village, enclosed by stone and shadow. Few went there unless they had to. The festival had always taken place in the outer yard, where flowers were scattered and drums sang like hearts. But this year, for reasons no one would say aloud, the elders had chosen the grave field. And they had chosen her alone. No other dancers, no musicians. Just her breath, her body, and the bones beneath the earth. They said it was honor, that the spirits had whispered her name during the rains. That the wind turned when she passed. But Eniola had seen the fear in her aunt's eyes, the way her hands trembled when she braided Eniola's hair and laced it with white shells. She had heard her uncle argue in hushed tones, saying she's just a child. Let her wait another year. But there had been no waiting. The moment the rooster crowed, they had brought her to the elder's hut, and the stones had already been marked. Now she stood alone at the edge of the field. The stones were half buried, crooked with time. Some bore names, others only lines and swirls that no one living could still decipher. The earth was dry and cracked, but in places soft, like breath had been exhaled there too many times. The village stood far behind her, just shadows now, watching from a safe distance as the girl with bare feet stepped into the mouth of the forgotten. The first step was meant to be light, graceful, respectful. But the ground welcomed her foot like it had been waiting. She did not stumble. She moved like she had in the square, arms flowing like the river, hands whispering stories into the air. Each movement was one her mother had taught her before death, one that had been passed through generations of women who danced to wake the ancestors, to beg for protection, to thank the unseen. At first there was only silence. The sky held its breath. No wind. No leaves rustling. Not even her breath dared to echo. But then the ground beneath her began to warm. Not with fire, but with something older, like memory, like pulse. She felt it through her soles, through her legs. The earth was remembering. She danced. And as she did, things began to stir. Not bodies, no corpses rose. But light, faint and gray-blue, pooled like mist above certain graves. It shimmered, then stilled. One by one, points of soft luminescence lit the field. Eniola didn't falter. She turned and the lights followed. She knelt and the lights bent low. She leapt and the air thickened to hold her. She did not know how long she danced, only that she no longer felt tired. Her limbs moved like water, her chest did not burn and her feet never bruised. The shells in her hair began to chime, though there was no wind. And from behind the stone at the center of the field came a whisper, not of words but of welcome. She was not afraid. When she finished, the lights hovered still. She knelt in the center, hands open, palms up, offering nothing. The sky above her darkened though it was midday. A breeze rolled in, cool, sweet, unfamiliar. And in it voices. Laughter. A sigh that might have once been her mother's. From the village, no one dared step forward. They had expected her to fall, to faint, to scream. They had prepared a mourning cloth in secret. But Eniola rose with grace, hair unloosed and eyes like thunderclouds. The lights followed her as she walked back, slow and sure. And when she passed the oldest elder, his knees gave way. You should not have gone alone, he whispered, terrified. But she only looked at him. And smiled with a mouth that remembered every ancestor's name. The night the blood moon rose, the sky bled quietly across the horizon. The village behind Eniola had long since gone still, shutters drawn, fires dimmed, as if to deny the night its full shape. She stood alone in the grave field, the grave dust clinging to her ankles like ash. Her body already knew the rhythm even before the drumbeats could begin. Not that there were any drums tonight. Only the silence of those buried and the weight of their waiting. She had danced here before but never under a sky like this. The blood moon poured red light over the stone markers, dyeing the lichen and cracks in hues too ancient to name. Eniola took her place at the center of the grave field again, her feet bare, the hem of her dark cloth brushing the earth like a secret. Her arms rose slowly, and with a breath drawn from somewhere beneath her ribs, she began. Her body moved with the same grace as before, but the air was different now, thicker, heavier, like moving through the memory of water. With each step she took, the ground beneath her feet began to feel less like soil and more like breath. Warmth pulsed up through her soles, first gentle, then insistent, until it felt like the very dirt beneath her skin was pushing back. Not to stop her, but to move with her. As her body turned, the grave field responded. The cracked earth sighed, groaned, then shifted. It was not an earthquake. It was not a tremble. It was a movement of something conscious. A dance answered. Her heart stuttered, but she did not stop. She couldn't. She feared that if she did, whatever she had stirred might finish the movement without her. Her arms arched in a wide circle, her fingers tracing shapes she hadn't been taught, but somehow remembered. The names of the old ones, those who came before breath and bone. The wind died. Eniola's breath caught in her throat, her arms suspended mid-turn, yet her legs kept moving, one foot sliding forward, one bending at the knee, toes pointed as if another rhythm guided her bones. She hadn't stepped like that before. She hadn't meant to. Her mind remained alert, rooted in confusion, but her body was no longer hers. The dance had taken her. A slow arc of motion pulled her into a spiral, her back arching gracefully, her arms weaving patterns she had never studied. The air thickened with something old, something heavy. It pulsed with memory, yet not her own. Every movement felt carved from time, each gesture part of a script written long before she was born. Her feet glided across the earth like they belonged to someone older. Someone remembered. She tried to stop, but her hands continued to rise, her spine bent in perfect rhythm, her breath synced with a song she could not hear. She was no longer the girl named Eniola. She was a vessel. An echo. The mist thickened. From the corners of the grave field, it began to pour between the tombstones, pale and curling like breath on cold glass. Shapes formed in it, not shadows, not exactly. Faces. Shoulders. Long robed torsos. The spirits emerged in silence, drawn to the motion, to the rhythm Eniola did not understand but could not stop. One, a tall figure with eyes like stars caught in water, stepped forward, a palm over its chest as if greeting an old friend. Another wept. A woman with skin that flickered like candlelight and hair like woven smoke. Tears shimmered down her translucent cheeks, vanishing before they touched the earth. She watched Eniola with sorrow, yes, but also awe. They gathered in a ring around her, not to harm, but to witness. Still dancing, Eniola's body moved through a sequence of steps that ended in a wide, open stance. Arms out, palms up. Her head tilted back. Her mouth opened. A voice not her own whispered from her throat, "We are not forgotten." The spirits bowed. One stepped forward, a child no older than 5, eyes bright with fire and memory. It reached up with both hands and murmured, not to the sky but to her. "Mother." The dance paused. Eniola staggered, almost fell, but the ground held her. Her heart pounded, her hands trembling. I'm not," she began to whisper, though the words did not come out fully. The child looked at her with calm knowing, as if her confusion didn't matter. The rest of the spirits lowered their heads. The wind, long gone, returned in a spiral that circled Eniola once before rushing into the sky. She stood alone again. The grave field quieted, but the air hummed around her with a reverence she did not understand. The dance was done but not over. She hadn't learned it. She had remembered it. And in remembering she had become something else. Ask ChatGPT. The night deepened as the grave field glowed faintly with the aftershimmer of the dance. The spirits had not vanished. They lingered, hovering at the edge of visibility, their faces drawn and watchful. The wind grew sharp, brimming with expectation. And then it happened, the moment they all realized what was missing. No flame. No bowl of millet. No blood. No offering. The elders had promised, every year at the end of the Festival of Remembrance, a gift would be placed at the center stone. A basket of food, a silver coin, a lock of hair, something sacred to the ancestors, to ensure safe passage of the wandering dead. But tonight they had left Eniola dancing alone. And fled. At first the air simply paused. Then it recoiled. The spirit's glow flared to white-hot, then blue, then black. Their eyes turned hollow and their mouths stretched in silence, not to speak but to scream. They rose higher into the air, shifting in unison, no longer human in posture or expression. They were not here for vengeance, they were here for remembrance. And they had been denied. The gray field trembled. Tombstones cracked, roots curled and split the soil, and the sky, though clear, rumbled low like something ancient stirring. Trees at the edge of the field bent inward. The mist turned sharp and electric, threading like veins between the spirits. Something was unraveling. Eniola stood alone at the center, her hands shaking. From the path behind her, no elders came. No villagers. No priest with oil, no girl with incense. The cowardice of the living had birthed a hunger in the dead. The smallest spirit, the child who had called her mother, looked at her with wide, growing eyes. Its body flickered violently. Around it, the others began to shake, some weeping now not with memory but with fury. The lull between death and forgetting was being broken. Eniola could have run. But she didn't. She took a breath and stepped forward toward the great stone at the center of the field. The wind nearly knocked her down, but she kept her footing. She bent her knees and bowed low, hands on the earth. And then she sang. It was not the ceremonial chant taught by the elders. It was not the stiff, sanctioned recitation they had used to close the festival year after year. No. This was the lullaby her grandmother had sung to her as a child, wrapped in a woven blanket by a crackling hearth. A song not of ritual but of love. Mamasai lo sugbana kiya. Sleep now, my star, you are not far. Her voice cracked but continued. Mamasai jo sugbana imi and I. We will dance though the spirit weeps. The wind slowed. The earth stilled. The tallest spirit leaned forward. The rage in its form softened, retreating inward. Another dropped to its knees before her, dissolving into petals that scattered across the soil. The mist dimmed from white to silver. The cracking ceased. Eniola kept singing. More spirits bowed. A few smiled. One, her own grandmother, faint but unmistakable, stood in the mist with tears gliding soundlessly down her wrinkled cheeks. She reached out not to take but to bless. And then they began to fade. One by one they returned to the ground, not buried, not erased but folded back into the memory of the soil. The final shimmer to vanish was the child's, whose little hand waved once as it dissolved, whispering the word again. Mother. Silence returned. Eniola remained kneeling before the stone. The gray field pulsed once beneath her feet, not in anger but in acknowledgement. A breeze stirred her hair. From the dark edge of the trees the elders watched, ashamed, unseen. She did not turn to look at them. She did not need to. The spirits had raged, and she had stilled them with a song of love, not fear. An offering had not been given, but something greater had. Herself. The gray field had gone quiet, but the quiet was not empty. It was full. Full of breathless waiting, full of something deep and shifting beneath the soil. Eniola knelt on trembling legs, the last note of her grandmother's lullaby still lingering in her mouth, when the earth before her cracked open, not violently, not as a threat, but like a sigh that had waited centuries to be let go. From that split in the ground, mist rose, not the sharp electric mist of unrest, but a soft veil of memory. And then from the heart of it, a figure emerged. She moved without footsteps. Her robes were woven from grave moss and ash-laced silk, her arms draped in bone bracelets that chimed like hollow wind chimes. A crown of twisted roots sat on her head, and nestled in its tangles were beads, teeth, feathers, rings, the things the living leave behind and the dead never forget. Her face shimmered, not decayed nor youthful, but something eternal. Her eyes were dark, bottomless, and knowing. The queen of the dead had come. The other spirits withdrew as she passed. Even the air bent back. Eniola did not speak. She could not. The queen tilted her head and studied her with a gaze so deep it felt like falling. You sang, the queen said, her voice layered, a mother's, a warrior's, a mourner's all at once. Not to bind us. Not to banish us. But to remember. Eniola opened her mouth but no sound came. The queen did not seem to mind. You remembered what the living forgot, the queen continued. You did not run. You did not beg. You stayed. She raised her hand and the mist around them shimmered into shapes, past dancers who had fled, others who had vanished. The last time someone had danced alone in the gray field had ended in death. But Eniola still stood. You awakened something, the queen said. Something older than this village. Older than the names carved in stone. Behind her, shadows twisted, not threateningly but reverently. The wind carried a song that had no beginning or end, only rhythm. Your blood remembers, the queen said. You are not merely dancer. You are seed. You are door. And then she offered it. From her robes she pulled a circlet made of vines and moonstone, etched with symbols that shimmered when touched by mist. It pulsed faintly, not like a weapon but like a heartbeat. You may return to your people, the queen said. Or you may stay. Rule the border between breath and silence. Wear the crown. Speak the names. Lead those who listen. Eniola stared at the crown. She saw what it meant. If she took it she would not die, not exactly, but she would no longer be of the living. She would become memory incarnate, a guide to those lost and forgotten. She would live between steps, between songs, between seasons. She would belong to the dead even if she still breathed. If she returned she would be forever marked, revered maybe but feared too. The girl who calmed the grave field. The girl who spoke with spirits. The girl whose dance woke the queen. So she did something neither expected. She lifted her chin and said softly, "May I have time?" The queen blinked. No one had ever asked that. To choose? The queen asked. To understand? Eniola replied. To know what it means to belong to one world, or both. The queen was silent a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. You are wise, she said. Too many choose quickly. Few ask to listen first. She closed her hand around the crown. When the moon next bleeds we will ask again. With that she stepped backward into the mist. The ground closed silently behind her. The spirits faded. The grave field dimmed. And Eniola stood alone again. But this time it wasn't fear she felt. It was gravity. Wait. The sensation of having been seen by something larger than life and left with a choice not of destiny, but of will. She turned toward the village path. Somewhere beyond the trees, firelight flickered. The queen's voice echoed once softly from the mist. You walked barefoot among the dead, and they bowed. Eniola kept walking. Each step hummed. She had time. She would listen. When Eniola walked back into the village, the ground seemed to bend softly beneath her feet, not as if she were heavy, but as if it recognized her. The air changed when she passed. The scent of damp earth followed her, and shadows leaned toward her rather than away. Her eyes glinted not with fire, but with reflection, like a still pond that had swallowed the moon. She didn't speak much. Her words were few, careful, like she weighed each one before letting it free. When people asked what had happened in the grave field, she would look at them long and steady and simply say, I remembered. The elders gathered quickly. They summoned a village meeting beneath the shrine tree, incense curling in thick spirals between their fingers. Their faces were drawn, their voices tight with urgency. Chief Omode, who had once called her barefoot girl, now looked at her like she was an unfamiliar language carved into bone. The girl has returned changed, he declared. We must not mistake her silence for sanctity. The spirits marked the curse too. She shouldn't have survived, added Elder Remy. No offering was made. It is unnatural. Unnatural, Eniola said softly, her first word in days. Is forgetting the dead more natural? Her words landed like drops of water in a dry basin, quiet, but undeniable. People shifted. Mothers clutched their children. A breeze rustled the leaves though no wind had been felt all day. The elders hurried to frame a narrative. They told the village Eniola had gone mad in the grave field. That she had danced too long and let the dead possess her. They claimed her return was a curse, a warning. They ordered her not to speak of what she'd seen. Not to share the words of the dead. But children do not listen the way adults do. They watched her instead. They watched how she walked barefoot and how petals followed her. How dogs who once snarled now wagged their tails near her. How at dusk her shadow danced before she did. They mimicked her quietly in the courtyards, twirling once, then twice, then bowing to unseen presences. And then the dreams began. One by one, villagers woke in the middle of the night with a song in their ears, soft drumbeats, bones tapping bones, a hush like breath over stone. Some saw their departed loved ones standing in the grave field, smiling faintly. Others dreamt of Eniola dancing in red light, arms lifted, eyes glowing. The dreams did not scare them. They comforted. They unsettled in the way forgotten truths often do. Word spread beyond the village. Travelers came to see the girl who danced alone among the dead and lived. Some brought offerings. Some brought questions. All left changed. They carried stories of her stillness. Her gaze. The way fruit ripened quickly where she sat. The elders panicked. They barred her from the village square. They forbid children from watching her. But by then the shift had already taken root. Women who had lost children began leaving small flowers at her door. An old hunter who once mocked her began humming a tune she had danced to. Even the trees near her hut bent slightly inward as if curious. Then one morning a boy from the neighboring town, mute since birth, stood outside Eniola's home and began to dance. When he finished, he whispered a single word. Mother. No one knew if he meant his own mother or something older. The elders tried again. They accused her of conjuring spirits, of leading children astray. They called for her exile. Eniola stood in the center of the crowd, back straight, feet bare, and said, I did not ask to be chosen. I asked to remember. She looked at each elder in turn. You forgot the names. You forgot the offerings. You ran when the wind called. I stayed. The silence after that was thick. It was the children who moved first. They came and stood beside her barefoot. Then the widows. Then a man whose brother had died in the fields. Soon a small circle formed around her, not made of force, but of choice. That night, as drums echoed softly in the windless dark, Eniola danced once more. Alone but never lonely. And this time, when her feet brushed the earth, the whole village listened. It began with a flower. Not a garden bloom, not anything sown by hand. It grew wild and white from the grave of an old midwife buried 30 years before. Eniola had walked past it, paused only a moment, and by morning the flower had bloomed fully, its petals shaped like small reaching hands. By the next week 7 more bloomed. Each from a grave long untended. Each following Eniola's path. She had not returned to the grave field out of duty. She went because her feet took her. The earth pulled her gently as if it remembered her dance and wished to hum along again. Where she knelt, moss turned soft. Where she wept, new grass pushed through hardened soil. And always the dead watched. She felt them, not as ghosts or threats, but as a great stillness behind her shoulder, a waiting breath. Children followed her more freely now. They mimicked her gait, learned to step with rhythm rather than rush. They laid small things by the graves, stones shaped like hearts, ribbons from torn cloth, bits of song scratched onto paper. They knew she saw the dead, and maybe, just maybe, she taught them to see too. Then the animals returned. Birds, once gone, perched along the fence that circled the old burial ground. Dogs stopped barking near the shrine and instead sat, heads tilted, as if listening to a lullaby in the wind. One evening, a mother wailed as her goat dropped dead in the field. By dawn the goat was gone, no drag marks, no blood. Just a soft indent in the grass, and a trail of petals leading to the cemetery. Something had changed. Eniola began to dream again. Each night, the queen of the dead stood in the mist, silent. Her crown woven with ash, bone, and starlight. But now her eyes looked softer. She raised one hand and touched Eniola's brow. With that gesture, Eniola awoke, and a small living vine had begun to grow in her hair. It was slow at first, delicate, green. But it grew daily, winding gently above her ear, curling toward her temple like a blessing. It did not itch. It did not pain. It pulsed with life. And the village could not ignore it. They watched her in silence. Those who once doubted her now crossed the road when she passed. Those who once pitied her now bowed their heads. She never asked for reverence. But she no longer hid from it either. One evening at dusk, as the elders gathered to prepare the upcoming festival of remembrance, Eniola entered the shrine uninvited. She walked barefoot and the old wooden floor did not creak. She said nothing at first. Simply stood, her presence enough to still the room. Then her voice came low and clear. The festival must change. The chief blinked. Change? He asked as though the word itself was offensive. Eniola nodded. The dead do not want dance performed in fear. They do not want false offerings or words spoken only to silence them. This has been our tradition for generations, said Elder Remy. And it has been misused for just as long, Eniola answered. The offering was forgotten. The dance was stripped of meaning. You turned remembrance into spectacle. The queen of the dead stood beside her then, not in flesh but in the minds of all present. A sudden chill swept through the room. Candles flickered. One fell and shattered without flame. Eniola continued. This year there will be no dancers forced. No empty rituals. The names of the forgotten will be read aloud. The children will carry lanterns. Food will be shared at the graves. And the dead will walk beside us, not behind. The silence that followed was not fear but something heavier. Like shame. Chief Omode opened his mouth, but the words failed. Outside the sky darkened too quickly. Thunder rumbled low like a warning. The vines in Eniola's hair reached further. Small buds bloomed above her temple. Change, she said again. Or the dead will change it for you. And she left. That night, the cemetery glowed faintly. The graves pulsed with light no lanterns had provided. The names of long-lost children were whispered by the wind. The queen's footsteps echoed in the trees. And somewhere between root and sky, the dead waited to see if the living would listen. They came for her at dawn, cloaked in red sashes and trembling righteousness. 7 elders each with a reason. One said Eniola walked too close to death. Another claimed she had awakened something they were never meant to stir. The youngest muttered about order. The oldest simply said, she must be contained. They opened her hut without knocking. But the moment they stepped inside, the air changed. It grew still, too still. Their breath became visible though there was no cold. Time hesitated. Eniola stood in the center of the room already waiting. She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She looked at them like someone watching fruit rot, inevitable, distant, unbothered. You have chosen to close the door, she said softly. But the wind is already inside. Elder Ajani, boldest among them, tried to grab her wrist. His hand stopped midair. Not from resistance, from forgetting. He blinked. Then again. Why, he stammered. What was I? He turned to the others, but their faces were blank. Confused. As if they'd all misplaced something at once. Take her, someone barked. But no one moved. Outside the wind rose, not harsh but full. It carried voices, hundreds layered over hundreds. Old tongues. Weeping. Laughter. Secrets. They were not angry. They were remembering. And they remembered Eniola. From the fields and graves and dreams the dead came. Not with violence. Not with fire. They gathered gently, silently, around her hut, a throng of silhouettes glowing faintly, humming with history. Children once buried too young. Mothers who died unnamed. Dancers from a forgotten century. They did not speak to the elders. They whispered only to Eniola. Inside, Elder Remy fell to his knees. I don't remember why we came. One by one the others stilled. Their eyes hollowed with confusion. Elder Ajani stumbled back, face pale. Who are we? The red sashes dropped from their waists like shed skins. By sunrise the villagers gathered. They found Eniola sitting at the threshold of her hut, vines curled around her ankles, eyes clear. Around her, stillness. Around the elders, absence. No one recognized them. They wandered like strangers. Asked where they were. Could not remember their own names. One woman tried to speak to Elder Remy. He stared at her, then asked gently, Do I know you, child? They had been unseated without blood. Not killed. Not harmed. Just forgotten. No titles. No names. No memory of authority. And no one rushed to help them remember. The village, without the weight of the old voices, felt lighter. Children laughed closer to the graves. Women sang lullabies again near the shrine. The wind no longer circled with suspicion. It swayed the grass like a lullaby. And Eniola? She stood, looked at the fading sky, and whispered back to the ones who waited. Thank you. The moon hung low and full, casting silver across the grave field. But there was no dread in the village that night, only the slow rising rhythm of drums, the scent of burning herbs, and the rustle of feet preparing to dance. Eniola stood barefoot on the soft earth, her long skirt brushing the tips of flowering grass that had once grown over forgotten graves. Her crown was not gold but a tangle of living vines, bone-white lilies, and night-blooming herbs. It grew from her as naturally as her breath. This was the first festival of the remembered. There were no sacrifices. No silent prayers offered in fear. No elders whispering instructions from behind thick incense smoke. There was only remembrance. The villagers gathered with candles and family names written on strips of cloth. Children ran barefoot, laughing, their faces painted with the symbols of ancestors. Women sang the old songs again, ones once forbidden, now rising like river mist. And then Eniola began to dance. But this time the dance was hers. She moved gently, her arms carving wide arcs through the air, her feet pressing love into the soil. As she danced, the earth responded. Light blossomed from beneath her steps. The grave field glowed faintly, then brighter, until each mound pulsed like a quiet heartbeat. One by one the spirits emerged. Not as terrors. Not as shadows. But as soft shapes made of moonlight and memory. Old fathers with pipe-scarred lips. Sisters taken too young. Midwives and hunters. They walked among the living, not to haunt, but to remember. Villagers reached for hands they hadn't held in years, and though the touch passed through like mist, warmth remained. Children ran between the legs of glowing ancestors, laughing, their eyes wide with wonder, unafraid. A woman called out her brother's name, and he answered. An old man knelt and saw his wife's face, glowing with the beauty she wore the day they wed. He wept and thanked the ground. And still Eniola danced. She did not lead with power. She led with memory. From the center of the field, the queen of the dead appeared, crowned in bones and flowers, wrapped in robes stitched from dusk. She watched silently, her head tilted, her eyes endless. And then she bowed. Oh, reverent. To the girl who had once danced in fear and now danced in grace. The village watched. No one spoke. And then they danced too. Feet moved over ancestor stones. Names were shouted, sung, cried. The wind carried them all. Roots shifted. Flowers opened. Even the graves breathed, sighing with the joy of being remembered. By morning the lines between worlds had blurred. Not destroyed. Not broken. Just softened, like a veil lifted gently from an old face, revealing the truth of what had always been there. Eniola stood at the edge of the grave field as the first light warmed the horizon. Behind her the queen faded into mist. Around her the last spirits drifted back into the earth, humming the lullaby that had once quieted their rage. Eniola smiled not because she had been crowned, but because no one would ever be forgotten again. Ask ChatGPT. The years passed, but Eniola did not change. The children who once danced with glowing spirits grew older, had children of their own. The elders who once denied her power withered into silence, their names washed away by wind and forgetfulness. Yet Eniola remained. Some swore she still walked the grave field at dusk, barefoot, skirts trailing dew, eyes bright with stars. They said she spoke softly to the air and that the air answered back in rustling leaves and gentle sighs. Others claimed she no longer had a body at all. That she was the earth beneath their feet, the warmth in the grave mist, the rhythm in the roots that pulsed with stories beneath the soil. No one buried anyone without first calling her name. She had become the bridge, not just between the living and the dead, but between forgetting and memory, between silence and song. The grave field had once been feared, a place of dread, of sacrifice, of whispered names and cold feet. Now it was sacred. It bloomed year-round. There were no fences, no gates. Just low stone markers etched not with sorrow but with verses, songs, jokes, stories. On full moons, families gathered there to picnic among the graves. They brought stew and music. They danced. And sometimes, when they closed their eyes and moved to the rhythm of old drums, they swore they felt her pass between them, not like a ghost but like a pulse of memory in the bones. New children were born who never knew the village as it once was, who didn't know fear of the dead, only love. When asked who Eniola was, they pointed to the blooms that grew brightest in the grave field, or to the smooth stones that felt warm beneath their fingers. She's the dance, one girl said. She's the breath of the ground, said a boy. She's the part of the story that never ends, whispered the eldest of them all. Some who visited from distant villages doubted the tales. They looked for a queen with a crown or a shrine of gold. But all they found was a field humming with peace, and a tree in the center where no grass ever died, and wind that carried lullabies even in stillness. Those who stayed long enough sometimes saw her. A flicker of skirts beyond the mist. A shadow turning, arms raised in a graceful arc. And if they wept, the earth around them grew soft. Flowers opened. And the wind brushed their cheeks like a mother's touch. Eniola had never chosen to be queen. But the dance had chosen her. Not to carry the dead. Not to mourn them. But to keep them dreaming, and to remind the living how to remember. And so she remained, the girl who danced in bare feet, the bridge between worlds, the song between silences, the queen the dead chose, not because she demanded it but because she remembered. Ask ChatGPT.